Hello and welcome. This is Module 10, Aging. So today we're going to have a look at the philosophy of aging. Well, for most of us, life, when we consider the idea of life, has a life cycle, and that begins with some kind of conception and birth and then a maturing process, at which point your body begins to decline through until death. So this is the traditional view of what we're talking about. In fact, the whole idea of a life cycle is completely embedded within our scientific view of physiology and metabolism and how we operate. Before we answer the question about whether or not the life cycle as we just described it really is the only way of viewing what is possible for us, first of all what I'd like to do is actually have a look at some of the issues around aging and why aging is not desirable. Now you may well be sort of cringing a bit as I'm talking about this, because you might be thinking, well, is he talking about the fact that I'm developing wrinkles or starting to look older or something like that? Well, no, I'm not really focusing on your appearance or any of those types of things. I'm more focusing on the types of degeneration that go on in your body with aging. So they're in a number of areas, but the particular area that we begin with is the area of physical degeneration, and you only have to go into a nursing home and see the type of degeneration that's occurring to a person when they become elderly enough to end up in a nursing home to recognize that this is not a desirable thing to have happening. It's not desirable for our bodies to degenerate to the point where you get such a loss of physical functioning within your body. Equally, the mental degeneration that goes with aging once you're getting up to that nursing age type of situation, as you know, perhaps relatives of yours and certainly my own mother is in this category, the loss of mental functioning is quite extraordinary with aging as well. And there's no question, you only have to talk to anybody who is working with or visiting somebody that they love in a nursing home, and they'll tell you about the tragic sadness and sorrow that goes with the whole aging process associated with the mind, so the degeneration of the mind. So along with that cognitive decline, so we're talking about the decline in the ability to perceive and compute and compare and contrast, you have along with it very often, not always the case, but in very often you'll also get a decline in emotional function as well. So a decline in the ability to handle stresses and anything unusual that's going on in your life, and to be able to just manage the emotions which are incipiently coming up within yourself declines in this aging process as well. And once again, there's nobody who would actually admit having been to a nursing home and seeing how the people are suffering in there, that you couldn't describe, or that you could describe this as being a good thing. This is a terrible thing. It's an absolutely terrible thing that's happening to these people in these latter years of their life. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk about when you've got this combination of these degenerations. So we're talking about the physical degeneration, the degeneration of the mind, the cognitive degeneration, and also this emotional degeneration. And the first one is that you become very locked and very fixed in your ways. And that might sound like almost the definition of an old person, is that they become locked in what they believe. However, this is very, very important and extraordinarily important in terms of what we're going to talk about in a wee moment within the videos, and that is you know, our life's purpose, what our purpose is. Well, the whole business of becoming locked down and unable to change and unable to see the benefit of alternatives becomes an enormous deficiency as we're aging. So this aging process leads us to a place where we are fundamentally far less capable of functioning than we were as a younger person. So along with that reduced capacity for change, we also have the increasing tendency towards having fixed views and fixed habits. So these habits, you know, may well be you know, the simple things of life, so what you like to have for breakfast and how you like to structure your day. And of course, once again, when you find somebody who's ended up in a nursing home, what you see is this tremendous distress that goes on for this person, because all of a sudden all of their normal rituals are no longer available to them because they have to fit in with the nursing home culture, whatever the process that they're going through there. And the stress that this creates on this elderly person is just truly awful to examine. So far more of an issue and amongst all of that as well, once again when we start looking at the purpose that we might have for our life, is that this crystallization of habits and beliefs means that there's little or no opportunity for you to to be able to grow, to actually have growth and that human evolutionary process within yourself once these aging processes have kicked in. So sitting alongside of this cognitive decline that we're talking about is also an emotional decline. So if you're in the situation where you are visiting people within a nursing home or in a geriatric ward or something along those lines, or if you have, perhaps you have very elderly parents that you're nursing yourself at home, you will know that the ability of these people as they become older and go through this aging process to be able to cope with emotional stress in their lives is diminished dramatically, so much so that it's very, very common for people to hide family events, for example, from their elderly family members because they don't want to hurt them, they don't want to disturb them, they don't want to distress them. Well, it's not desirable in the remotest for you to become or to go into a situation where you've declined to the point that you're no longer emotionally capable in this way. What we're really talking about here is the ability to, or the capacity to manage change, and with this aging process, the ability to actually cope with or entertain change decreases dramatically. So, say, around about my age group, I'm 54 years old, around about my age group, generally speaking, people are pretty capable of managing the stresses and changes that are going on in their lives, although I venture to add that the reason that many of you are in trim is that you're actually recognizing that it's becoming increasingly difficult for you to do so. So it's one of the main reasons why people are involved in trim, is that they're actually struggling to cope and adapt to the fast pace of change that we're seeing in our lives. However, by the time that increases through an aging process, it gets to the point where you become extremely debilitated as a result of it. And lastly, the thing that I want to talk about is the fact that we get such strong habits and strong crystallized positions coming with aging as well, so that there's absolutely no chance of a person, once they get well advanced in this aging process, to be able to get to a point where they will go, aha, something could be different, something could be better, I could adapt. That type of opportunity has gone out the window once you get into this advanced aging situation. So we talked a lot there about the negative side effects of aging. What about the person who is choosing immortality? So in my opinion, we're getting to the point, certainly medically, where the choices around immortality are very, very present. So we are right in the place and the time where physical immortality is becoming available to us. So why would somebody choose to be immortal, and what would be the characteristics of somebody who went into this immortal role? But firstly, what I need to do is actually shatter a few ideas that you might have around it. So the first thing, or one of the things that comes up for people when they hear me talking about the idea of becoming physically immortal, is they say, how selfish, how inward-seeking they must be, how vain they must be, how all that kind of negative stuff. The reality of somebody who is following the path of immortality is absolutely the reverse of it, because what you're describing then when you're talking about all of those negative traits is actually the traits of a mortal person. These are the traits of somebody who is mortal. So what are the traits of somebody who is immortal? Generally speaking, they're going to be far more engaged in the process of collaboration and cooperation, for example. So once again, a mortal view of these things is you look after everything for yourself because you haven't got very much time and you need to look after yourself, and perhaps you need to look after your immediate family as well. And after that, you're going to be dead, so you're not worrying about it. If you are going into this area of immortality, then you must inherently become much more engaged in a collaborative, cooperative process with everything around you. And so we're talking about the environment here generally, which is all the other people on the planet, but it also includes, for example, all of the plants and animals and bacteria and viruses and all the rest of it that you're sharing the planet with. You must become far more collaborative, far more cooperative with all of them. This is inherently a selfless approach. So what we're talking about here is a person migrating from the mortal view of where you are completely self-centered, and you're migrating from that view to a person who is remarkably selfless. Certainly this is the path and this is the journey. To become completely selfless is a very long trek for many people, or for most people. However, if you are heading in this path of immortality, you are heading on the path towards becoming selfless. I've said it before and I'll say it again, one of the major factors which is leading to the pathology of modern man is the profit motive. So this is the motive to do things to benefit yourself at the expense of somebody else. Now that somebody else could actually be some factor from the environment, such as our food supply or indeed our energy sources and the environment in general, but it equally can be that you're actually, whatever it is that you're doing at the moment is deliberately and directly benefiting yourself at the expense of something or somebody else. This is a truly mortal person's view and approach to what's happening here. Somebody who is following the path of immortality necessarily has to be moving away from this model. They have to be moving away from the idea of the profit motive. They have to instead be heading towards these processes which we're describing as cooperation and collaboration, but really these other facets of selfless service become very, very important in this. We've talked about a person aging, and what we were describing was this tendency to move from the global, so actually having a global view and instead actually becoming incredibly tied into a very, very, very small view of things. The opposite of that, a person who is heading on the path towards immortality, physical immortality, is that they are becoming increasingly global in their view. So very wide-ranging, very able to understand different points of view, different cultures, different ways of operating, because you see yourself as being part of this much greater whole. So where we're heading with this description of a person who is heading on the path towards immortality is what we're really doing is we're talking about a person who is awakening or evolving. And clearly what we're talking about here is a person on the mental, emotional level evolving to the point where they're becoming very balanced and pretty developed, in fact. And further to that, that their spiritual development is increasing apace as well. So the person who is heading on the track towards immortality necessarily, once again, is actually heading on the path of personal development and also spiritual development. Okay, well look, I hope you found that useful. The TRIM program underneath it all has this principle of immortality and the object of getting yourself into a situation where you are becoming far more developed from a mental, emotional perspective and also as a spiritual perspective. And of course, to support that, what we need to have is a body which is very healthy and able to live a long period of time to allow these processes to occur. So, unless you're one of those very rare people who have a clear inclination to becoming a saint at the age of 30 years old or 20 years old or whatever, then perhaps this argument doesn't describe you. But for the rest of us, me including, the opportunity to actually have the time to gain this type of inner growth and spiritual growth is what this is all about. So thanks for watching. Please post on the Facebook group, and if you have any questions, I'll be very glad to answer them. Thanks for watching.